Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Joining me down there in Tequila, Georgia, my good friend, fellow University of North Georgia alumni Matt Green is here. Voice of Georgia, voice of college football, host Matt Green. How are you, sir?
I appreciate that, man. I'm doing well. It's good to be back with you talking college football. I felt like after getting a re-listen to our conversation, so much negativity coming from you over there, and trying to downplay that Georgia SEC championship performance. Just so much hate in your heart, Chase Thomas.
Did other people reach out to you about that, where it felt like Chase was a little angry about the Georgia thing? He went a little hard.
No, it's that I feel like
I didn't think I went that hard.
I feel like you skipped a step. That we were on step one that was like backup QB Gunnar Stockton coming in against maybe the best defense in college football and getting the win in the SEC championship. And then a couple weeks from now, we're like, okay, can Georgia win the national title with a backup quarterback? Then we have that conversation. But you skipped step one, sir, and we deserve step one. All that backup quarterback stuff that's happened to Georgia in the past. This is our time, sir.
Well, that's fair, but that's a Georgia fan perspective. I'm not going to have that feeling. I'm not going to be like, let's enjoy this. Like, that's not a natural response I'm going to have about Georgia and that story. But
it's without a doubt a great story. I don't think it matters who you're a fan of. Backup QB comes in, gets the win in a big time setting. Like, it's big time. That's why I was always against Florida State getting left out last year. Like, the Patrick Ewing effect, you know. Sometimes the supporting cast they rise up because they knew they need to do a little bit more. Doesn't mean the Knicks are better without Patrick Ewing. It just sometimes things happen that way. Doesn't mean the Braves were better without Acuna. Sometimes things just happen that way. So like I hated that for Florida State going undefeated. Like who knows? That roster is so loaded. Maybe an average quarterback comes in there. They find ways to win games. I don't know. I don't think Georgia would be the betting favorite right now, but to win the national title, but like crazier things have happened than like this team making a run with Gunnar Stockton. Especially look at the potential like opponents. Like it's not crazy to think Georgia could beat, you know, the potential opponents on their schedule with a backup quarterback.
We don't have to relitigate just the nonsense that Georgia's going to be walking through here on that other side of the bracket, Matt Green. And now we're doing the underdog thing where he's already gearing up for those underdog dogs. Josh Pate just picked Georgia to win the national championship on his show this week, sir. There's national folks who are picking the dogs.
Of course.
So I'm not going to allow this to happen. I'm not allowing the underdog story stuff that no one believes in us. Matt Green's already laying the foundation here. He's like, look, everyone loves an underdog story. We have nothing to lose. Everyone's going to be doubting us. And Georgia's going to be favored in every game they play in the college ball playoff, and it's going to feel like they're underdogs. You're already laying the foundation
part of that
here.
Don't you think part of that is people kind of having their opinion about Georgia's side of the bracket? Like, I think if Georgia was playing maybe a Texas or an Ohio State or an Oregon to get to the national championship, like then that backup quarterback thing might come into play more. I think people just respect Georgia more than they respect some of their potential opponents. But I'm saying you've seen a list coming out like the best quarterbacks in the playoff, and Stockton is literally 12. Like you're coming into the college ball playoff with a quarterback who's never made a start in college. It's without a doubt an underdog story. It's just fortunately for the underdog, he's surrounded by a bunch of 4 and 5 stars that can help him out. But Stockton, if Georgia wins the national championship, I mean, it's gonna be incredible. I mean, like Cardale Jones, like that was an incredible story with Ohio State, and we know about the first rounders that were on that Ohio State roster. So it'll still be a great story if Gunnar Stockton and Georgia find a way to get it done.
Not on this side of the fence. Won't be a great story. I'm good on 3 titles in 4 years for the Dogs, Matt Green. So, but it would like add to the legend.
We're on step 1 still, sir. We're still in just euphoria, just winning SEC champs.
I mean, there has to be party though. It's like you're just not allowed to have like a first round quarterback and win titles. Like it's just the JT Daniels thing all over again. If Gunnar Stockton does come in and just light the world on fire, and it just works. Where I don't know, like, what if that's the rule? Georgia's not allowed to have elite 5-star quarterbacks just do really well. Like the avenue is 3-star, 4-star walk on, or just
First
an
of
over.
all,
What?
First of all, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Were you done?
Well, no, I was just saying that, like, just the less talented guy in the room, the overlooked guy in the room is maybe just if he has success there, it's twice in those gaps where JT Daniels 5-star, Carson Beck high NFL first round talent, JT Daniels had first round talent, and then you have
You're loving JT Daniels, giving a little too much credit. This guy went to West Virginia.
Hold on, when he
Rice,
came in, no. Don't do some don't. We're not doing some revisionist history here. When he came to Georgia, that was a big deal. It was a 5-star transfer, and that was a different kind of deal.
Of course. And JT Daniels was really good in his small time as the Georgia starting quarterback, and put up some big yards and everything. I think there's some similarities to that dynamic of JT Daniels to Stetson, but let's not get it twisted. Gunnar Stockton was probably about as highly ranked of a recruit as Carson Beck was coming out of high school. Like, he's like a top 100, 150 prospect. So
we should
he's
just
not
put the mobile
walk-on.
quarterback where Georgia, because that's the other part. It's like Carson
Feels like the
and
same
JT.
style. Yeah.
And I think maybe that's something that works. But also the other part of it that I think there is a comparison with Stetson and Gunnar is Stetson had the locker room, and you could tell those dudes loved Stetson Bennett and rode hard for Stetson Bennett. And I'm not saying they're not riding hard for Carson. It just, that post game, you could just tell dudes ride for Gunnar Stockton. Like, there's just something about his presence in the locker room, him being around for a while. He's clearly done a good job of developing relationships and clearly being a good teammate. Because I just, the reaction from guys after the game and going into this, I don't know. It just feels like there's a lot of folks who are rooting for Gunnar in that building.
I mean, first of all, I definitely agree with you in terms of just, I think when you're that style of player and you like don't avoid contact and you're a quarterback that lowers your shoulder and you get up and talk trash and get in the defender's face, like, that's the kind of stuff that fires up the rest of the team. But I think some people say that with the implication, not like the caveat that you added, with the implication that Carson Beck didn't have that. And I don't believe that at all. I think it's just a different skill set. And Carson Beck, especially with his skill set, was starting to make plays in the running game. And like, that was one of the kind of catalyst plays that a lot of people point to in that Tennessee game when Carson Beck got like the 10, 15-yard scramble and lowered his shoulder at the end and like got some contact. So I think Carson Beck is still that guy. Like, I find myself keep defending this guy throughout the season because so many people like have made such a big issue of his off the field stuff and his girlfriend and in his car. And it's just like, dude, it's not important. Like, the dude is a really good football player, but that's not to say that you can't also, Gunnar Stockton can't also add a spark and something different actually does improve this offense. You know, it's like maybe Stetson wasn't a better quarterback than JT Daniels in 2021. He definitely became a better one in 2022. He was lights out that whole year. But in 2021, he still just had his times of being inconsistent and everything. But there's something about just that skill set of the quarterback bringing that dynamic of being able to run and now it opens up for the backs a little bit. It's just, it changes the game. And you've seen a lot of just good college quarterbacks that weren't big time NFL prospects have a lot of success in college because they can use their legs to make plays.
Absolutely. Well, we'll see how it goes. We got another week before we do our previews here, and Georgia, you have to wait 2 more weeks anyway because the bye down there. So we've got some time before we see what ultimately happens with Gunnar and who will be matched up with in that first game, Matt Green. But the portal is open. It opened on Monday after we last taped on Sunday night, sir. I thought it'd be a fun idea here with the Vols and Dogs here to kick things off with the Vols portal strategy and then dive into the Dogs portal strategy. And what I mean by that is like what you would do because of guys who are in the portal right now for Georgia, guys who have been rumored to come into both schools, like where their needs might be, where your head's at this point going into January here. It's crazy that we're having to talk about roster additions and preparing for 25 while we're both in the playoffs here, but that's just the nature of the school calendar. and what have you. But Matt Green, I think when you look at the Vols right now, one of the things I'm looking at in terms of the portal is I think a lot of Vols fans are wondering, okay, so 2 receivers went in the portal already in Chaz Nimrod and Caleb Webb. Chaz, a former 3-star, Caleb Webb, former 4-star from McEachern. Both have been with the program for several years. Nimrod's gotten a lot more run this year than Caleb. Caleb's more of an outside guy. It was just a crowded room, and he was just pushed down the depth chart. Good kid, both good kids, and it was just one of those where when you have this influx, and Georgia's kind of going down the same way here with the influx of receivers, and that's why Nitro Tuggle, I think, maybe potentially entered the portal here, and now he's back out, but they're also looking at Singleton from Georgia Tech. We'll get into that in a second. But what I'm saying is, like, ultimately, I think it's very interesting to me what Tennessee's going to do at the portal at receiver, because I think fans are always going to want another running back, especially if Dylan Sampson goes to the NFL draft. We were like, oh, I don't know, but I pushed against that. Like when Damian Martinez came up for Tennessee in the spring, I was like, I think Tennessee doesn't ever need to pay big top dollar for a running back. I think they're always going to be able to run the football pretty well. You're not going to probably have another single season like Dylan Sampson at Tennessee under Heupel, but the goal is to have a rotation. And I think with DeJuan Morris coming in, 3-star, superstar talent from Oakland here in Murfreesboro, you're bringing back Peyton Lewis, 4-star. You're bringing back Cam Selden potentially. He hasn't entered the portal yet. Bringing back a couple different guys, and I think they're going to be okay there. I think they're going to be able to rotate there, even if Deshaun Bishop, that was the one I was blanking on. I think to me, because you're bringing in a 5-star tackle and you close on David Sanders, you don't have to go tackle because Lance Hurd's still in the building. So I think they're okay with Hurd and Sanders. I think they're going to have to go guard, but that's a good spot to be in. Like, I'm okay if Tennessee has to continue to live in the portal at guard, because I just think you can find quality depth there. And I just think, I don't know, Tennessee has been fine rotating there a lot and having they've plug and played a lot of different dudes at left guard over the last 4 years. So if you have to go in the portal, we're going to see what Andre Carrick is applying for his a redshirt season from a couple years ago. So if he wins that, then maybe he'll be back next year too.
O-line just feels like not where you ideally want to go to the portal. It feels like such a cohesive unit. It seems like obviously you want to recruit wherever you can, but I don't know. O-line would worry me.
O-line, because there's just not a lot of talent. Like the reason O-line, you don't want to live in the portal with O-line is because it's such a highly valued position, and there just aren't that many dudes who are built to win in the trenches. You know what I mean? Like, I think you can get more defensive line talent. Like Ole Miss just did it with Walter Nolan and Princely. Like, I think there are more of those guys, like the Jared Verses and stuff. Like, you can find those kind. Still not a plethora, but you can have more success there. Offensive line, anyone who has a good tackle, they're paying their good tackle to stay. The reason Lance Hurd was in the portal last year is because LSU had 2 NFL offensive tackles. Like, so there was nowhere for him to play. So he moves over to Tennessee and he starts right away. Like that was a unique situation. But generally speaking, if you're a team with a high, like NFL quality offensive tackle, those are top dollar guys, and those guys aren't just hitting the portal. Like those teams are keeping those guys in the building. So you don't want to live in that spot at tackle. Like you never want to go be like, oh, we got to get our left tackle out of the portal. That's a dangerous spot to be in.
I kind of wonder if it's just the nature of the position, like defensive line. You know, maybe you're a guy, you're not liking how you're used in your defense or something. You want to be more of a pass rusher or something, you know, something. There's like different dynamics of like, you're trying to put up stats, get to the league. And it's like offensive line. It's like, if you're doing your job on the offensive line, like they'll find you from anywhere. Like if you're just locking down your left side, your middle of your interior line, like people will notice. So
yeah, you can go to the NFL. Like Iowa puts them out, bad offenses. Northwestern, bad offenses. They're still going in the first round, top 10. Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you play football. If you're a good offensive lineman, you'll pop, like you said on tape. I think though for Tennessee ultimately, like Micah Hudson, the former 5-star receiver who committed to Texas Tech, who was the biggest recruit they've ever had, he's in the portal. I'm curious because that to me on offense, if they go anywhere, I think they got to go back in the portal and at least get one top receiver. Like Chris Brazzell has not worked out this year. Maybe it works out better next year, but it just I don't know. Like you're losing Webb, you're losing Nimrod. I'm curious if you lose anybody else here. Dante Thornton, your best receiver, he's moving on. He's out of eligibility. He's going to the NFL. Brew McCoy's out of eligibility. He's gone. So you're losing 2 starters and maybe your 2 best receivers this year. I think Sorrell will be back in the slot, but he'll be pushed by Braylon Staley there. Mike Matthews should be on one side. But you don't want to go into the year where you're just counting on all these young guys to be just ready to run and be superstars in the outside and in the slot. So to me, I think they have to. I would spend big on offensive side of the ball. It'd be receiver. Like, I don't know if it's Micah Hudson. I don't know who. If it wouldn't be Concepcion with me. I don't think it needs to be a slot guy. I think it needs to be someone who can win on the outside. Personally, like a bigger receiver. I don't know who that ultimately is, but they've missed that Cedric Tillman guy on the outside, and I don't know. I don't know who it ultimately is, but to me, I would just go big game hunting at receiver and see what you can find there. Outside of that, I think they're okay. Then on defense, I think it's just the interior. You're losing two starters in Amari Thomas and Omar Norman-Lott. I think they need to get a defensive tackle, high energy guy there. You bring David Hobbsby back, Jackson Moy. You're fine at strong side defensive end. You're fine at Leo. You'll be fine at linebacker. Maybe a safety corner. I think you're fine. Tennessee really doesn't have a lot of needs. To me, Matt Green, it's kind of similar to what Georgia needs. Because I feel like Georgia needs a receiver, but they're pretty loaded at a lot of spots. To me, the only thing Georgia could really use, kind of the same, is the interior, where it's like, do you bring Bear Alexander back in the interior? But to me, Tennessee's two big needs in the portal, where I would spend the most amount of money and kind of allocate my funds if I was Tennessee, would be receiver and defensive tackle. But what about you on the Georgia side?
Yeah, I would say something similar. I think you've seen, obviously, Georgia's a team that would prefer to not use the portal. Like, I think 2022, right? Georgia took 0 portal guys. That wasn't a lack of trying. That's how
Did they really
worked.
not take anyone?
Yeah, I don't think they took one guy. Them and Clemson, I think, were the only Division I teams that didn't take any portal guys. Because I remember Kirby saying that post game, every single one of these guys, whatever, not in the portal. It's like, well, last year you had guys, and next year you're gonna have guys. But he was specific about it that year. How much they love
Speaking
Georgia.
of, I'm a Clemson fan. Like, you win, you're like, oh no, Dabo thinks this worked. Like that's the worst thing to happen, because Dabo's like, see, if we go to the portal, none of this happens. Everything's fine. Everything's fine.
Exactly. But so obviously Georgia wants to just get everyone out of the portal or get everyone out of high school. So I think where Georgia's strategy is in the portal is the positions you haven't recruited as well out of high school. And clearly in the last, 3-4 years, that's been the wide receiver position. And you've seen them go to Dom Lovett, to Ra Thomas, to Colby Young, even I'm forgetting some guy, London Humphreys, even back to Lawrence Cager. You've seen Georgia get a lot of receivers in the portal through the years. So that's been obviously, more out of necessity than anything. But this year's team, or this year's recruiting class, bringing in Talon Taylor, bringing in CJ Wiley, maybe you don't have the same need at wide receiver that you once did, but you saw Eric Singleton, that's his first name.
Yeah.
I want to say, from Georgia Tech, his first visit, once he put his name in the portal, was to Athens. So clearly portal is a top priority for Georgia. Wide receiver is a top priority for Georgia in the portal. Dane Key, the big target out of Kentucky, I think is visiting Georgia. Barrion Brown, I was a little surprised when I saw his stats, because that dude was a stud as a freshman. Didn't have a big of a year this last year at Kentucky, but I feel like he still has star home run hitter potential, at least dynamic return man, and just kind of gadget guy at the very least. So he's always been explosive and been tough to play when Georgia's played him. But yeah, I mean, the defensive line, they brought in Xavier McLeod last year, so it's not like Georgia's just so good on the defensive line they're above getting anybody. I feel like Kirby Smart at this point uses the portal just to get depth at times. It's maybe this guy's your number 3, number 4 at a position, but that makes us better because now we have a stronger player at 3 or 4. You saw, they were going to bring in Maliava to transfer last year, a guy who had starting experience. He brought in Rashada last year, a guy who had starter experience, to be the 4th string quarterback. And I can't remember what school it was. I just saw an update from someone, a quarterback. Was it Charlotte maybe? That has started a couple games, and he's looking at Georgia potentially transfer. So Georgia's just 3rd, 4th string quarterback. Kirby can never be too careful when it comes to that. But yeah, it seems like Georgia obviously wants to build out of high school, but wherever the needs are, they'll try to fill them through the portal. you're going to lose Malachi Starks and Dan Jackson next year at safety, but with the way Georgia recruits in the secondary, and you already have lost Julian Humphrey at corner, but you also brought in Ellis Robinson a year ago. Maybe that guy's ready to take the next step. So I don't see Georgia being too active, but wide receiver is definitely where I would say if they're going to get a guy who's truly an impact player in 2025, that wide receiver is the most likely spot for it.
Yeah, and it's the whole thing that both are going to have to juggle, which is Tennessee's bringing in 3 blue chippers at receiver in Travis Smith Jr., Joakim Dodson, and Rodarius Jackson. They also have Mike Matthews returning, Braylon Staley returning. It's a lot of talent, an infusion of talent, and you have to be careful with how many transfers you bring in to manage it, because you don't want to take off the guys you have. So it's this never-ending balance of like, we like our guys, but we also need depth, and we also need the whole competition. Iron sharpens iron. Like, we're not sure if all these guys are gonna be ready, so you don't want to lean too much on young guys. You also don't want to lean too much on the portal. And I think Georgia's doing that too with Taylor coming in, 5-star receiver. They've got a lot of talent. Like they went big at receiver in this class on the freshman side. So I'm curious how both programs manage this influx of young receiver talent with the portal and the guys they have. Like, what's your ideal? I mean, we're still a couple months out from spring ball, obviously, but like, what is your early outlook on receiver? Do you think who would you guess is the starters in the 3 spots going into spring ball?
I'm sure a portal guy will be one of those.
So portal 1, yeah,
I'm sure. But I mean, you got Dylan Bell likely back next. I mean, that's the thing too about these teams that are in the playoff. There's going to be guys in the portal that are on this roster that are contributors on this 2024 team that aren't yet in the portal, right? So Dylan Bell, I expected him to make a bigger impact in 2024 than he has, but maybe he goes back to being the number 2 or 3 option, and he's a lot more dangerous that way. And he's not a true number 1 guy, but I still think Dylan Bell will probably be one of the leading receivers. Dom Lovett, I think, is out of does he have eligibility left? I'm blanking on that right off the top of my head.
I'm not sure.
George had him for 2 years, so I don't know. Everyone gets like 7 years at this point. So
well, no, the COVID stuff's almost out. Like, I think it's out basically.
Arian Smith, I think he's done. I think he's a senior. But you could have, maybe it's multiple guys. Maybe it's Singleton, maybe it's Dane Key or someone that they get. I imagine Georgia's not going to get whoever they want because everyone wants a receiver. And you're seeing a lot of the top guys in the portal so far are receivers. And it just feels like that position that you can make like an instant impact. But I mean, and Nitro Tuggle, you mentioned him. Like, yeah, he's taken his name out of the portal as of now. So, maybe he's a guy that takes a step up next year. But yeah, I mean, this receiver group wasn't strong in 2024, so it's going to need something to give it a little bit of juice. Maybe
shall
Anthony
see
Evans
what ultimately happens here.
Maybe Anthony Evans transfers. I don't know. Well, who knows what could happen?
I wonder what happened to Muse, and I saw him. He's at Houston, I think. Makai Muse. Yeah. I was like, he had that spring ball return. He was a good return guy. But yeah.
He had returns in real games. He had at least one, he maybe had a kick and a punt.
Was it Mizzou? He had a big one.
I can't remember which game it was, but it was at the one of the early games in the season. I think maybe the season opener. He had, I think, a punt return or a kick return to the touch for a touchdown.
UNC.
London Humphreys was one I didn't mention. Maybe he takes a step up as well.
Maybe. But I agree. I think my guess is they go, if I had to guess what it looks like next year, it's Bell, Tuggle, Portal. It might be Singleton, something like that. But that's my guess as a start. Yeah. Maybe Taylor. I think Taylor's going to push. Like, he's a talented kid. And we'll see how much run he gets. But
yeah, I didn't even mention the true freshman. Hopefully one of those guys is good enough to come in and make an impact. But yeah, I would be willing to bet one of the Georgia's 3 leading receivers will probably be a former transfer.
I tend to agree. UNC and a stunner, Matt Green. Hired Bill Belichick. We're going to do a whole coaches deep dive in the offseason here with the winners and losers and really dive into all these different coaches going to different spots. But I mean, we have to at least acknowledge this on this program. I'm actually more excited about Rich Rod at West Virginia because I think that's going to be fun and make I miss West Virginia having a fun offense and just being fun. So I think that'll be the good for the Mountaineers. But in terms
It
of
worked out so well with Mac Brown, part 2 and UNC. West Virginia was like, yeah, let's do that again.
well, I just love that like the whole like you move on from Mac just if the age was a part of it, and then like Bill Belichick's 1 year younger than Mac Brown. He's 72 and Mac's 73. I don't know. I mean, I think it's interesting for college football, right? Like, I think at the very least, it's interesting. It's kind of like, to me, I was texting with the Thomas Family group chat where I'm like, it just kind of reminds me of Colorado with Dion, where obviously completely different in some ways, but not in others, where it's like we didn't know how Dion would do at the FBS level. Because, I mean, he'd only really been at Jackson State, was a high school guy, obviously an all-pro and just superstar in the NFL. But you still just were like, this is a big step up, man. And Colorado's a tough job, and I don't know.
Belichick is like the greatest coach of all time, like potentially in the NFL. Like he has a way longer track record than Dion.
Well, but in the NFL, and that's what I'm saying is like he has a track record in the NFL. This is very different. When Saban came from the Dolphins to the Crimson Tide, that's a little bit different. You're going into a very advantageous spot. Like Alabama was starving for a winner. They were willing to go all in. Alabama has the history. It's football first. You were walking into
he's also a college national championship winning coach too, like before that.
Yeah. All that being said, I don't know. I mean, I think if you're a Tennessee fan, you have to monitor this at least a little bit because if they do get this NIL boost, if they do put football more on the map and they do really buy into Belichick here, that hurts Tennessee because Tennessee has gone in and gotten the number 1 player in the state of North Carolina several years in a row. The number 1 overall player in the 2026 class that is committed to Tennessee is from North Carolina and Faison Brandon. So, I mean, that's something I guess to monitor here. Tennessee just got the number 1 player again in this class, and Isaiah Campbell. He's a defensive end. So that was down to North Carolina and Tennessee. So there's a lot of talent in North Carolina. It's just never been treated as a premier job, and you're always going to fight the whole Carolina basketball situation where it's just a basketball state, and college basketball has run supreme. It's always reigned supreme at NC State, at Duke, obviously. I don't know. I don't know if he's going to be able to do it, but Wake Forest. I don't know. I think it's interesting at the very least. Like, it's better than him just sitting around doing podcasts and popping on the Manning cast every once in a while. Like, I am fascinated to see how it plays out. Just like Dion at Colorado, where I'm like, I have no idea if he's going to do the recruiting work necessary. I don't know if he's going to hire well enough. I don't know if he's going to stick around long term to make this all work. Like, I have no idea. But Dion's proved us wrong. He just went 9-3, and I don't think either of us thought Colorado was going 9-3 this year. But I'm curious. Like, that's if you're a North Carolina fan, I think you have to be I don't know how you're upset about this because you're like, what are you going to do? Were you really going to like, oh, let's go get John Summerall from Tulane, or let's go get that's a Larry Fedora type hire. Like, maybe he's good. Like, I don't know, but it's like, you know what the ceiling is there, 8-4, 9-3. Like, it's not a real commitment to trying to compete with the big dogs.
I think that's if you're getting a next up and coming coach, like that, there's definitely a path to
I mean, they've done that. They've been down that road. And it just wouldn't be, you wouldn't get the financial investment. If Belichick wins on that front, where he gets that financial investment and that buy-in from NIL, boosters, the university, everything else, then that's a different ballgame. And I'm curious because, I mean, Miami is right there. Miami is a national powerhouse. Like, they are recruiting still in the blue chip ratio. They can win a championship based on how they're recruiting and hitting the portal. They still can. They're the only one in the ACC who can do that. But I am curious if North Carolina can do it, Matt Green. I mean, what is your immediate reaction? Because I think at the very least, I'm just curious.
You're saying Miami is the only team in the ACC that can win a national championship?
Yeah,
right now?
100%.
Florida State can't win a national championship?
No, not even close.
The year
right
if they went 13-0?
I don't think they were winning the title that year.
Clemson
anyway.
won 2 in the last decade.
Clemson.
I don't know.
That Clemson's been done. Like,
I don't know about that. That's a hot take.
You're not winning a national championship without dipping in the portal.
Miami hasn't even won the conference since they joined the ACC. Like, so right. I'm just saying, like, that's Mario.
I mean, they have the number 1 offense in college football this year. They have a Heisman type quarterback. Like, they still recruit well at the high school level. They're in the blue. Like, Miami still operate like an SEC team, is my point. Yeah, like, Miami operates like an SEC team.
They still have Mario Cristobal, so
I'm not disagreeing. My point is, like, the bare bones is Miami operates like an SEC team. Like, if Miami moved to the SEC next year, they would live in the kind of Ole Miss zone where they're at right
I don't
now.
know. Just the fan base. They don't have the fan base that these SECs. But I'm focusing on the wrong part of the story here.
I also think Miami's going to be in the SEC sooner rather than later. But and
It's
that's the other part is UNC. Does this make them more? Does Greg Sankey like perk up a little bit where it's like, huh? Okay, if you're going to invest a little bit, all right, we'll make room for North Carolina. We'll make some room.
Belichick, it just feels so short term. Like,
Yeah.
Dude's 72 years old. Like, how?
That's why you got Steve ready to go. His son ready to step in right after.
He's such a proven head coach in the college football level and everything. Like, that's the thing. I don't necessarily get it just from that perspective. But obviously, like you're talking about Deion, like compared to Deion, like Deion was very unproven. But he's like youngish in terms of he's older now, but he's still cool. Like he's like the coolest person in the world. So he might as well be young, right? And he just, so from a recruiting perspective, it's like, I feel like he didn't doubt that Deion would be able to recruit. He's just like a cool guy that like people want to be, Travis Hunter literally wants to be. But he
kind of recruits, right? He doesn't do the recruiting that like, it's weird. Like he gets Julian Lewis, he gets Travis Hunter, Jordan Seaton, but he's not stacking blue chippers. He's plucking some blue chippers. Cormani McLean.
But he's at Colorado, and he's definitely doing something, Like
right.
he's
100%.
He's recruiting at a level they haven't seen. But that's another thing. But
he's maxing out what Colorado can be.
Yeah, and that's what I was about to get to, because apparently he doesn't do in-home visits. So that's just wild to me. Like I had to like with the whole like scratch your eye, like I did a double take on that one. Like Bill Belichick with recruiting kind of becoming less important. Like that's kind of the angle. Like recruiting is always going to be super important, but the like your level of recruiter is not as important. Like, yeah, built a great relationship with this guy since 9th grade. They offered me $150,000 more, so that's what I'm going to do. Like that's so much of recruiting now is the budget. So if North Carolina's committed and like you have like a GM, I think they talked about like that's kind of doing that aspect of it. It's kind of ironic because that was Bill Belichick's like whole thing in the pros was him and Bill Parcells, right? If you're going to be the cook, you want to buy the groceries. Like, so I wouldn't see him being that kind of hands off when it comes to talent accumulation, but in terms of just recruiting, maybe you got a staff of young guys that can get out there and be on the trail. And then Bill Belichick's Super Bowl rings, speak for themselves. And that's what guys are going to sign on to. Because, maybe it doesn't. Also, there's the angle of maybe it's not the best thing to recruit high schoolers, but maybe guys that want to be in the NFL that are going to transfer are like, well, this guy knows a lot about the NFL. So it's a proof of concept right there. And maybe that's North Carolina's strategy to be more of a portal heavy team. Like we really have no idea kind of what Belichick's approach is at this point.
And that's my thing. It's like anyone who's like, oh, it's going to be a home run or, oh, this is going to be a dumpster fire. I'm like, all right, sure. Like, you have no idea. Like, there is no... like, there are some, when they get hired, you have an idea. Like, you know what? I have a pretty good idea that Rich Rod will be okay. Because I've seen Rich Rod at West Virginia. I just saw Rich Rod have the number one rushing attack at Jacksonville State. Rich Rod basically wins wherever he goes. Like, people have this weird memory of Michigan, but I don't really... That was a weird spot.
It wasn't great at Arizona, though.
He was pretty good at Arizona. Arizona won pretty consistently with him. Like he had some good teams there.
Fun offenses. They had that one dual threat quarterback that was like a low key Heisman candidate, right?
What was his name?
I forget his name, but I'm gonna.
He's 60 and 26 at West Virginia, and he's 190 and 129 as a head coach. Like Rich Rod's a good coach. Like I think he's gonna be good back at West Virginia. I have no earthly idea. Yeah, he went 10-4 in 2014 at Arizona. Do you know how hard it is to win 10 games at Arizona? Like, Rich Rod's a good coach.
Yeah.
Arizona's one of the worst power forward jobs of all time. Like, if you look at the history of Arizona football, brutal. However...
Hey, Teddy Bruschi took him to a Rose Bowl.
I just encourage you to dive into the Arizona win-loss record. The history.
No, it's definitely terrible. But I've heard Arizona be talked about as like one of those kind of sleeping giants because apparently a lot of Arizona in terms of population is just a very fast growing state. So there's kind of like it's low key like a pretty like talent heavy state in high school recruiting, and it's kind of gotten better over the last like decade or so.
Here's my Rich Rod. This is the ultimate Rich Rod approval, by the way. Jed Fish, 16-21 at Arizona. Kevin Sumlin, 9-20. Mike Stoops, 41-50. John Makovich, 10-18. The only good head coach here that I'm looking at, outside of maybe Larry Smith for a little bit, Dick Tomey, who's their best coach probably, I guess, of all time, 90-64.
Of course.
From 87 to 2000. Rich Rod went 43-35. He had a winning record.
Jim's brother, I believe. Jim Tomey, that was the joke.
I got it.
All right. What was Rich Rod? Sorry, what was the last point you made?
Rich Rod, winning record at Arizona over 5 years. Like, it's just, Rich Rod wins, man. Rich Rod is a good hire, and it's a fun hire. Belichick, I just have no idea. Like, but I am just curious, and if you're a Tennessee fan, you should keep an eye on the recruiting aspect of this, because I'm very curious, to your point, how much he prioritizes high school recruiting in the in-state, because there is a lot of talent, top-end talent, in the state of North Carolina, in the Charlotte area, and Tennessee's done really well there in the Heupel era. So I am curious about what that looks like in those battles here in the next year or two. But at the very least,
Jordan
man,
Davis, Todd Gurley, two of the best Georgia Bulldogs of all time.
100%. So I'm curious what it looks like. But hey, it's going to make next season even more interesting, man. That's the thing. Is like, that's going to be another fun TV show to monitor, is like what Bill Belichick, and how crazy it is going to be to see Bill Belichick on the sidelines of a North Carolina Wake Forest game.
Absolutely. And co-eds, be on the look. This guy, I'll leave it at that. We know about his girlfriend. I'll leave it at that.
Goodness gracious. SEC schedules revealed here, Matt Green. What did you have anything in particular you wanted to dive into outside of the dogs or in the balls here, or did you have something you want to throw out here?
Just some great non-conference games early on in the season. I don't think I was aware of. Alabama going at Florida State week 1, which I guess that's just good brands. I don't even know what Florida State.
Also, sidebar: are we taking crazy pills? What people are talking about, like Thomas Castellanos from Pascal. I'm like, he got benched in the middle of this year.
He committed, right?
Huh?
He committed to Florida State.
Yeah, and
right?
I'm like, there's like, oh, good haul. And DJ Uyunglele hasn't hit the portal, and I'm like, okay, so your choices are Castellanos or Uyunglele next year, and we're talking like, I think Florida State's gonna be bad next year, folks.
You're saying it's gonna be a good season?
Yeah, okay. Like I don't understand. Like, it's one of those things where they clean up, so you're excited. You're like, Gus, all right, Gus Malzahn, Tony White, he's Nebraska DC, okay. Okay, our top quarterback recruit just left, but he's probably not a fit for the Gus Bus offense. Thomas Castellanos, he was pretty okay at Boston College the first part. This is school number 3. Both of your quarterbacks are on school number 3 in DJU and Thomas Castellanos. Like, okay.
I mean, that's not that rare anymore. So I don't even know if that's a red flag.
I just think people are going to talk themselves into Florida State this offseason, and I'm like, I don't think so. I think this is just going to. I don't think they're going 2-10. But
I don't know if you can get. I don't know. Maybe they get preseason ranked because it's like it's the brands that get ranked. But 2-10, I would imagine there's not going to be too much hype about them unless they do a lot in the portal.
Well, they cleaned house. Like, I just think people are going to. My gut is Matt Green. And we'll reconvene here in the spring and summer. But my gut is Florida State is going to be talked about. It's like, I think they're a bounce back team, folks. I think you're going to hear a lot of talking heads. Like, I think Florida State just bounces back here, and I'm just gonna be like, I don't know.
I mean they could. I wouldn't be like shocked because the ACC is not very good. So
yeah,
it's possible. But
that's a good one. Over under, like or I don't even know if this is an over under. Greater or less than 50% chance that Carson Beck is the week 1 starter for Miami next year?
I would say greater than what percent?
50%. Greater or less than?
Less than.
Okay.
Maybe he's not going to get drafted high, especially this injury is gonna hurt him. But dude's going to get drafted, and it's like, get paid to rehab.
So
we're
sure he's going to the NFL draft. Is my thing. Because if he doesn't go to the NFL draft, do you think he's back at Georgia? Because I don't think he's back at Georgia.
We're not sure, but I mean, I don't know. A lot of that depends on how Gunnar Stockton plays in the college football playoff. Like, if it's a bad showing, then maybe Beck can come back. But I would think the guy is going to get drafted by somebody. It's not the strongest recruiting quarterback class necessarily either, in terms of just, I mean, J.J. McCarthy and Bo Nix went first round. Like, obviously, Bo Nix is having a great rookie year. But, like, teams convince themselves that guys are worth a first round pick. Like once the draft comes, like there's 2 guys that have a first round grade, and then the draft comes, and all of a sudden 4 or 5 teams are thinking about picking a quarterback first round. So not saying Beck will go first round, especially we don't know the severity of the injury. I think Brock Purdy is who people are kind of comparing it to, the UCL injury, and I think he recovered in like 7 months. So I mean, that's if you get surgery today, like 7 months from now, you are healthy enough to play in 2025 in the NFL. Like you're probably not going to as a rookie who's just now getting healthy coming off a rehab, but like it's not like in terms of like the guys get drafted and you just know that they're going to miss their whole first season or something like that. Like Todd Gurley didn't miss the whole first season, but like you just knew he was coming off an ACL and the guy wasn't going to be healthy for like the first month of the season or so. Like I don't think it's a career-ending injury. I don't know anything. I'm not a doctor. So I would think he still gets drafted. And if that's the case, if it's second, third round, go get paid while you're rehabbing that arm and learning an NFL offense.
Yeah, we shall see. Georgia front, though, I think we have to say, Matt Green, the earliest Georgia-Tennessee game since like 1995 I saw. Like you're coming to Knoxville very quickly.
Okay, I'll start with that, and then I'll get to the other non-conference one that I was interested in. But that was my biggest bummer of seeing this whole schedule, to be honest. Like Georgia, Tennessee, I'd started to enjoy that being the November primetime game on Georgia's schedule. They replaced it with Texas. I have this feeling that Georgia, Texas is going to become. It feels so natural for that to become a rivalry. Like the 2 brands just kind of, I don't know what it is, Austin and Athens, like these 2 like college towns. Like Austin's obviously more than just a college town, but I don't know. There's just something about the vibe of Georgia, Texas. We're going to go next November. That'll be the 3rd time Georgia and Texas have played. Shoot, they might play in the playoff again. Who knows? It could be the 4th time they're playing. In the 2nd season that Texas is in the SEC, and A&M is 14 years in this conference, and Georgia and have still played 1 time. I don't know what's happening there. There's a bigger story. Maybe we should be digging this Cold War that's brewing between Texas A&M and Georgia. But yeah, so I was a little bummed about that because if you just laid out Georgia's 12 games just on a piece of paper, regardless of where it was on the calendar, I think at Tennessee has to be one of the most dangerous games on the entire schedule. Because with this schedule being flipped, you got a lot of these good teams you played on the road last year or this year. You'll be at home in 2025 with Alabama, Ole Miss, Texas. So at Tennessee, just by itself is I think just that game you would circle as like that might be where Georgia gets upset. And then the fact that it's the 3rd game of the season coming off 2 cupcakes at home. So it's basically the first meaningful game of the season is in Knoxville in Neyland Stadium. And that's not always what you want, especially I kind of wonder if because Tennessee's offense, I mean, I guess this year's offense hadn't been that good against most teams, but because Tennessee's offense has been so good versus everyone, and then it gets shut down by Georgia in November, I kind of worry if like that's an edge that Kirby Smart and this defensive staff has that Tennessee puts everything out and they figure out how to study and how to beat this offense. And that 3rd game of the season, maybe they don't know what Tennessee is yet, and Tennessee has an advantage from that standpoint.
It's one of those things because Tennessee now getting Georgia, and I think this actually, my gut is this is better for Tennessee than it is for Georgia because I think Tennessee, generally speaking, like this is a huge win for Tennessee in terms of Florida because getting Florida and Gainesville in November is a much better deal than getting Florida first couple weeks. So I think Florida is going to be right.
Man, I didn't even see that. Really? Oh, yeah, so that's blasphemy.
Tennessee is playing Florida November 22nd.
Oh, that's awful. What is good is that's the second to last week of the season. That's the biggest bummer I have in Georgia's schedule, and I haven't looked at South Carolina's. I don't know who they play that second to last week. But these teams that play non-conference rivals in the last week of the season, it should be illegal for them to play a cupcake the second to last week. It's just to have the conference schedule end like the second week of November. It's such a buzzkill, honestly.
Can I make the case here? This is going to be way too early. The way too early segment here on Tennessee's 2025 CFP chances, Matt Green.
What's that?
So I said next year it looked like 9-3, 8-4. Like I thought this was the year you had to get in the CFP if you're gonna do it here in these first 5 years of the Heupel era. They get in, but this I didn't anticipate. I just figured they were running it back. I didn't think there'd be a gigantic change in the order of operations here on the schedule. Getting Florida and Gainesville in November is huge because I think Florida could have imploded by then. Like, we're going to see Florida still has a brutal schedule, and it's very tough early on, where getting Florida at the end of the year in Gainesville, I feel a lot better about that game than in September, where Tennessee has just been brutal at that point. I love that. I love getting Georgia at home early, get it out of the way, and maybe Georgia's not really firing all cylinders at that point. Maybe you get them in a Kentucky, Georgia type situation. I don't know. They're not as desperate like they were this year, where it's like it was a win to stay alive type deal. I think that's a win. But I look at the schedule and I just think it's pretty manageable. Like, at Alabama is obviously gonna be really difficult, but I think you still got to go 10-2 to make the playoff next year. But if you only drop Georgia at home and at Alabama, I mean, every other game here they're gonna be favored, and I think at Florida in the second to last game is a great change for them. Like, that's a huge win. That could be the difference between 10-2 and 9-3 to me, because I think that's a much more winnable game now. So I'm a lot more optimistic about Tennessee's CFP odds next year with Florida moving to the late November spot.
Yeah, I never really thought about that. That is interesting, and maybe there's something to go down to that heat in the swamp in September too, that you'll be able to avoid. But how about the Notre Dame Fighting Irish playing two SEC teams in the first month of the season? That's I don't know if I've ever seen that. But yeah, Georgia's schedule, I would say just look at the first thing I think is it feels like too front loaded. Like, I worry that you do have the bye week in between Tennessee and Alabama, but having Tennessee, Alabama, third and fourth games of the season, like, those are potentially the two best teams on Georgia's whole schedule next year. So the kind of advantage to losing early sometimes in the playoffs or in the rankings, and you're able to work your way back up. But obviously that Texas game on November 15th, that's just a bummer to me because, for one, we'd kind of like flip the Tennessee and Auburn games, and Tennessee was now that November game that was kind of like for SEC kind of standings, it had standings implications each of these last couple years. But now we're seeing Georgia, Texas. We're not guaranteed to see Georgia, Texas as the SEC championship again next year or anything. But the fact that we just saw it this year, and now we're going to get on November 15th, it's like we potentially see if we got a Georgia, Texas rematch again next year. I don't know. It would just be a real bummer, like, to see that game, like 3 weeks apart. Like, I'm getting way ahead of myself. Obviously, we don't know what these teams are going to be next year, but that's one thing I thought. But yeah, I'm a traditional guy, so I eventually accepted getting rid of Auburn in November and replacing it with Tennessee. But you kept that like traditional rival in that November spot. Now Texas, yeah, it's obviously going to be a huge game, but there's something I don't like about it.
Interesting. Well, Matt Green, I have 6 questions that we're going to break down, and we'll do.
Oh yeah. Before you move on to that, did you see a couple of these non-conference games though? LSU at Clemson first week of the season. Texas at Ohio State first week of the season. I had no idea. I don't even remember hearing about Texas Ohio State. Like, that's going to be massive. Like, so
the Quinn Ewers Bowl.
Absolutely. Is Quinn Ewers going to still be playing in college football next year?
I mean, maybe not at Texas. Like, I don't think you can run it back with Arch sitting for 3 straight years. Like, sitting for 2 is hard pressed. I don't know if Arch is going to sit for 3.
No, and he probably shouldn't.
Yeah. What if he goes back? Quinn Ewers, QB1, Ohio State next year? Who says no?
Yeah, let's do it.
I don't know. He feels like Miami to me. If they don't go Carson Beck, if he doesn't enter the draft, like Quinn Ewers at Miami, I could also see.
You got some inside intel on this Carson Beck to Miami stuff?
No, he's a Florida kid. Doesn't his girlfriend go to play at Miami? Am I misremembering that? Cavender?
I believe that's right.
Yeah, I don't know. Wouldn't surprise me. And they just went big at the portal with Cam Ward. I don't know. A lot to be. It wouldn't blow me away.
He would not fit in Miami.
Right? He just feels like he would be really good. Like I think he would have a really good season in Miami next year if he went there.
With his tats and his Lambo, and his and the TikToks and whatnot, he'd fit right into Miami.
I don't know,
but he's a dog through and through, sir. He's going to the NFL. He's I should have even entertained your hypothetical over there.
Hey, I'm full of hypotheticals here. We don't have games this weekend, Matt Green. We got to throw out the hypotheticals this week. So we'll do 3 tonight, and we'll save the other 3 for Sunday here because we won't have a recap weekend to get through, Matt Green. So the first one I want to throw at you, some burning questions I have here. The best CFP first round game will end up being which game and why, sir?
I'm going to say Texas and Clemson.
Huh.
Because Texas has proven nothing almost through 13 games this year. They played Georgia really close. I'm not acting like they're just some garbage team. Like, they played Georgia close in the SEC championship, went to overtime. Georgia also played with their backup quarterback the entire second half in overtime, a guy who's never played any meaningful snaps in college football. And it's not like he was Tua Tagovailoa out there as the backup quarterback. Like, Stockton made the plays needed to make to win the game, but they scored 1 touchdown and had 2 or 3 field goal drives in the second half. Like, it's not like Georgia was just going off with Gunnar Stockton. So you've seen a Georgia team that wasn't able to run the ball on very many teams, that wasn't able to stop the run versus very many teams, and they did both of those things versus Texas both times. So, and then their one good win is over Texas A&M. I just look at Clemson, and Clemson is in a similar boat. Don't get me wrong. Like, the best 3 teams they played until the conference championship were Georgia, South Carolina, and Louisville. And coincidentally, those were their 3 losses on the season. But they did beat SMU. That's their best win of the season. Texas beat A&M, their best win of the season. Other than that, these teams we don't really know who these teams are. So I don't see Texas blowing out anybody, to be honest, because the offense just hasn't really been there. It's like they have this reputation of what their offense and Sarkisian and what it should be, but for most of the season, it hasn't really been that. And then obviously the some of the inferior competition they were playing. But I think that's a game that Texas is just being talked about like they're one of those teams one of the few teams that can win it all right now. Like kind of like it's nothing. You know what I mean? Like it's just being spoken about like it's fact. And I think through 13 games, I still don't know how good Texas is. So I think that game is going to be a really sneaky game. And Cade Klubnik, like this dude can make some plays. Like if Gunnar Stockton's going to give you some trouble, like Cade Klubnik could definitely give you some trouble.
It's interesting you're going this way because I don't think so. I think Texas is going to stomp Clemson. So Clemson against good teams, man, I just don't think Clemson's good. So Clemson, they are 89th in scoring against FBS teams with a winning record this year, 19.2. Iowa at 90th is 19. Wake Forest, who is awful, 18.7. Kentucky,
Texas on that list?
18.1. Huh? Texas is way up here at number 19. They average 31 points a game against FBS winning record teams.
First teams with winning records, really?
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't think they'd even played that because I'm thinking A&M, Georgia, the A&M and Georgia games, they averaged what, like 17 a game in those 3 games?
That's true. I don't know, but
they put like a 30 spot on Michigan. They were definitely a team that had a winning record. They didn't play many other SEC teams with winning records. Maybe they have maybe there's another non-conference game I'm forgetting.
Yeah, I don't know. My gut is I think Clemson gets smashed here. Is my gut here, Matt Green. Is
I think that's how most people think.
And I don't know. I mean, maybe like it could be wrong. It'd be a humongous upset. Like I don't know what you do at that point. Like that's a bad look to be the favorite against Georgia twice, lose both games. You didn't really beat anybody all year. You're the most talented team most Saturdays, and you lose in the first round. You kind of back in. You lose the SEC title game. You beat A&M on the road. Currently, that's I guess your best win of the year if you're Texas. But if I was a Texas fan, if you drop this one, like it'd be like, wow, That sucks. We were we were one of the preseason favorites, and the chips fell pretty nicely for us, and we didn't take care of business here against Clemson. I don't know. My gut is no. It gives me no joy to say I think the best first round game is going to be Tennessee Ohio State. Like, I don't want it to be the best game, Matt Green.
Yeah.
I want this to just be a comfortable Tennessee victory in Columbus here in a week and a half, but I just don't think that's what's going to happen. I think this is going to go down to the last possession. I think it's either Nico or Will Howard with the ball in their hands with less than 2 minutes to go, 3-point game, 7-point game. My gut is I think this is coming down to the wire. The line's 7.5 or something right now. I don't know. I think Tennessee has a real shot of winning this game. I think this could be a gigantic game for Nico Iamaleava and his development. I think there's going to be some new wrinkles from Tennessee in this offense that we haven't seen. They get 3 weeks basically to rest up and prepare for this Ohio State team. I don't know. I think obviously this is going to be an interesting spot for Tim Banks, who his defense has just been elite for the past year. What do they do against this Ohio State team? And this Ohio State team just lost by 3 touchdowns at home to a 7-5 Michigan team. So Tennessee's definitely better than Michigan and could absolutely go into the shoe and win. And I don't think there's any way that this game is not the best first round game of the weekend, because I think there's no way it's not close. It's my gut.
Yeah, I think that's definitely like the best matchup, and just in terms of just like, I don't know, brands, and just the one that excites everyone the most when this bracket first came out. I think don't sleep on those Clemson Tigers though. Also, one thing I noticed just now looking at the bracket, what's pretty cool is that no one's got extra time off or extra times of rest in these first round matchups. Like Indiana and Notre Dame neither played in a conference championship. Tennessee, Ohio State neither played in a conference championship. Then SMU, Penn State, Clemson, Texas, both of those, they all have the same amount of time off. So I think that's pretty solid for the first round matchup, because you'd hate for someone to, you get 3 weeks off or like 2 weeks off. It's like, what are we doing here? It's the same thing. But that's a solid that no one has that excuse for this first round.
Absolutely. Next one. Do you think a non-Power 2 team can realistically win it all with how the bracket fell? And if you do believe that, who has the best chance?
Just this year?
Yeah, just this
in
year.
general.
From the bracket and how it's all set up right now. Do you
Yeah.
think any of the non-Power 2 teams can win it all?
I don't think it has anything to do with the bracket. I just think no, there's just no non-Power 2 teams that are good enough this year. Like, if anything, this is probably their best year to do it. They go ahead and get that bye to the first round. Maybe Arizona State can make a run or something, as opposed to having to be the 11 seed in this thing. But yeah, when it comes to who are these teams? SMU, Boise State, Indiana, or Clemson or Arizona State. Those are the teams right there.
Notre Dame's
none
in
of
it.
those teams. Yeah, I said Notre Dame.
Okay.
I think they're
Notre
probably the
Dame's
best
my
one,
pick
I would say,
there.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pick Notre Dame to win it all, but they got a nice path. Like, Notre Dame's got a nice path to the national championship. Like, I think, isn't it Notre Dame favored over Georgia right now on FanDuel?
Oh, I don't know.
Did I see that?
It's possible. Yeah, getting Georgia with a backup quarterback, and people have talked about Georgia's side of the bracket being a little weaker. Yeah, Notre Dame, it's not like out of the realm of possibility for them to do it, but
yeah, especially if like a Big Ten team comes out, if like Ohio State comes out of the top end, and you get Notre Dame and Ohio State in the final, like, I think Notre Dame could beat Ohio State. Like, I think Notre Dame could hang with Oregon. I wouldn't pick them to beat Oregon, but I think they could hang.
I think Notre Dame can also lose to Indiana.
Oh, 100%.
So I don't know. I think this will be interesting. I'm not predicting Notre Dame, but I think of those teams, I think Notre Dame is got the best chance to do it. Obviously, I'm saying not to sleep on Clemson. Obviously, if Clemson is able to beat Texas, then they get Arizona State, a team like that might be a pick 'em. Like, I don't think Arizona State's going to be a heavy favorite if they are favored. So, that could get them all the way to the semifinals. But then you're talking about playing the winner of, Oregon or Ohio State, Tennessee. So I don't know. I tend to agree with you that of those teams, Notre Dame's probably the best shot. We didn't even mention SMU. We're sleeping on SMU for sure.
I don't see it. I don't think there's not a lot of Max Duggan to Jennings to me. Like I don't. I think if you're gonna do it at that, like you just kind of need that special quarterback. You need a Ritter at Cincinnati. Um, you need a Max Duggan at TCU. Jennings is good. I just don't think he's special.
It is that's fair. It's possible they got matched up with the worst team that got a home playoff game though.
True.
Like Notre Dame, Ohio State, or Texas. Like Penn State might be the one you wanted to get, and then if you get past them, Boise State in the next round, like it could be a lot worse of a road to get to the at least the semifinals for SMU.
That's true. Final one here. The most important player in the college football playoff to you is who?
I think it's got to be Gunnar Stockton. Just because I think for one, there's only a handful of teams that I think people are giving a realistic shot to win this thing, like 4 or 5 teams. Like obviously anyone can win it, but there's 4 or 5 teams that are kind of standing out the most. And it's like if Gunnar Stockton is good, like who knows how good Georgia looks? You know, it's like this is going to be a completely different team than we saw the first 12 games of the season, the first 12 and a half games of the season. So, you know, I tend to kind of think Texas is a little bit fraudulent, but maybe they're not. Maybe Texas is the second best team in the country, and Carson Beck just did what he did against Texas in the SEC championship, like, and he's ready to absolutely roll against someone else. So I think just because it's just this huge wild card, and also if Gunnar Stockton's bad, like Georgia's probably gone Georgia's potentially gone in the first round. Like I think there's just the difference in potential outcomes, I think is just massive based on the play of Gunnar Stockton.
Yeah, I could see that. I think to that point, like I think people are gonna think we're homers for this, but I think you could make the case Nico is right there. Because if Nico breaks out and like Nico goes on this heater here for 4 games, like he'll easily be the most important player in the playoff. Like if Nico hits a different gear here with 3 weeks to prepare, and like he goes off and builds some confidence by beating Ohio State in Columbus, I mean that's a game changer. Like that if he gets this Tennessee offense rolling, and goes into Columbus and has that kind of swagger, like that's a big deal. Like I think Nico could definitely be the main character of this CFP, depending on how things go.
No, that was actually my number 2, because Nico's been that guy that kind of all of college football has been waiting to become that superstar, and he's shown flashes of his ability. And like it's one of those things, like of all the guys that haven't done it, he would be the one that surprised you the least if he did it, right? Like just because you've kind of been waiting on him to do it, and we know what this Tennessee offense can look like when the passing game is going as well as the running game is. So Nico and Tennessee are definitely just like a chaos team in the playoff, right? Just because Ohio State and Oregon are 2 teams that a lot of people are picking to win this whole thing, and they have the potential to beat both of them. So I think and I don't know what the general sentiment is. What's the point spread's like 9.5 or something, right? For Ohio State?
No, I think it's like 7.5.
Okay. That makes a little more sense. Because this Tennessee defense, like that's just the ultimate kind of, you know, trump card, if you will, for Tennessee in that matchup. It's like, I don't see Tennessee getting blown out by anybody just because of that defense. And so if this offense starts to figure things out, like they're definitely
it's still
one
7.5, by the way.
Okay. They're definitely one of the more dangerous. They're definitely the most dangerous team that's starting on the road in this playoff, I think.
Yeah.
But I like your fourth question.
Well,
can we do your fourth question? I like that one.
Oh, he wants to he wants the fourth. He wants the fourth.
Yeah, let's go with that, because I had notes on that one. Also, the last one I wrote down before you say that, the Texas quarterback is also one of the huge storylines, because I'm not an armchair quarterback, or what is it? Armchair coordinator, play caller, whatever you want to call it.
I think armchair quarterback.
A lot of people second guessing Sarkisian right now, and I tend to think Sarkisian knows what he's got better than anyone else does. But there's a lot of people that are kind of, you know, wanting Arch Manning to play a bigger role, And maybe it is Arch Manning that breaks out and he's the star of the playoff. Or maybe it's Quinn Ewers that kind of like with Stetson Bennett, all the naysayers behind him, and then he has his best performance in the biggest game. So I think that whatever happens with the Texas quarterback situation is also one to watch.
I think that's true. Final one here. The most underrated storyline in the CFP is what, Matt Green?
The most underrated storyline is that Penn State could get all the way to the Final Four without beating anyone that anybody respects. Like the entire season. Like they haven't really accomplished anything and proven that they're any better than they've been in 2023 and 2022 and 2021. And they might get all the way to the Final Four by beating SMU and Boise State, like those being their two best wins of the entire season. Only played one difficult regular season game and you lost that one. Like, not to disrespect the entire Big Ten, they beat Illinois, right? That's the win they hang their hat on this season. They beat Illinois, but like it's insane to me how this has worked out. That Penn State feels like the most fraudulent team in college football to me right now, and they could get all the way to the Final Four without being proven fraudulent. And who knows? Georgia, we talked about the backup quarterback. Maybe they get a really bad. Maybe Gunnar Stockton's playing terrible, but they find a way to beat Notre Dame, and Georgia looks really bad, and they find a way to get all the way to the national championship. And we still don't know how good they are.
Your heel turn on Penn State is something that needs to be studied, because I've never met anyone who was so pro Penn State for 3 years, and then this year has just been vitriol and just full-on hatred for the Nittany Lions as a fraudulent team, a team that can't win it all, a team that's never going to win the big one. I to your point, I think I said on the Sunday show, Texas and Penn State lost the Power 2 conference championship games, and I think both are probably in really good shape to make the national championship game based on where they landed in the bracket and their first round games and who they're going to get matched up against. Like Texas avoids Oregon in the second round with their matchup. Like you look at what they're going to get here. I mean, Texas is, I think, in a very good spot, and I think Penn State is too. But Penn State, they could get a backup quarterback in Gunnar Stockton in the Final Four to keep them out of the national championship. People are going to talk about like, oh, it's going to be a huge time. I don't necessarily. I don't think in the portal era and how well Penn State's recruited, I don't think it's going to be that big of a difference. There will be a difference a little bit. Don't get me wrong. Don't come at me, Georgia fans. But let's not act like Penn State's not loaded with blue chippers. They're in the blue chip ratio. Penn State's going to be solid there. Penn State absolutely can go in the national title game, and I don't even know if Georgia fans or people nationally will give them credit if Gunnar doesn't look good against Penn State, and Penn State just wins like a 17-13 boring slugfest to get to the national title. I don't know. I think Penn State's kind of in a lose-lose there because no one's going to give them respect if they make this run, to your point, based on who they're playing, but they also don't control that. Penn State doesn't control the way the bracket worked, but if not now, like Penn State fans, I imagine, are just going to be extremely on edge for the next month because you're just not going to get a better path to a national championship appearance, or at least a Final Four, probably again in the James Franklin era.
I mean, I think that's true. I think 2023, with everything they had coming back on that defense, and I thought Drew Aller was going to take that step. Like, you look at his stats from last year, and it would suggest that Drew Aller was like maybe the best quarterback in the Big Ten last year, and you're just like, okay, I watched the few games versus good teams, and the dude looked like the same quarterback Penn State has had for the last decade. He just looks so average. And the same thing this year. You look at his stats, and you're like, dude's a stud. Penn State's got a good player. And then you watch them play their big games, and you've seen very few performances of him looking good. Like, obviously, they put up some points against Oregon last week in the Big Ten championship game, but like, you didn't score a touchdown against Ohio State. There was a conversation that could have been had, and I don't think it ever really was, like, in good faith, but like Texas and Penn State losing the conference championship games, like there was arguments to be had that Tennessee and Ohio State could both be ranked and seated higher than those teams. Like, you didn't want to punish them for losing the second or losing the extra game, but those teams never really like proved that they were better than Tennessee, or Penn State literally played Ohio State and lost. they didn't have any key wins that proved they were better. So it's that conversation was never really had, but they're both kind of in a similar situation that through 13 games, I still don't know what to make of Penn State and Texas. The only difference is I think Texas, if they find a way to get to the semifinals or the national championship, like they'll absolutely have proved it. Where Penn State, it's like this is as easy, like you said, this is as easy as it's going to get for them.
100%. All right, Matt Green. Well, you're in charge of one more question for the Sunday show to beef it up. But that was good. I'm glad we did that here.
Oh, tonight. And also
yes.
I tallied the numbers for our pick on the season. So like I said, you 120 and 58 overall. I went 117 and 61 overall. So you won 3 games overall, but against the spread, you almost caught me at the end, but I went 88, 89 and 1 against the spread on the season. You went 86, 91 and 1. So beat you by 2 games. Actually, the first year in our 4 years doing this that I've been below 500 against the spread. I was at 49.7% this year, so just barely, 1 game. That's all it was. But yeah. And on the season together, we were 49.2% against the spread. So, but 66.6% overall. So, we were giving the people winners and about 50-50. So I don't think you lost money if you were trusting us against the spread this year.
Well, I think that's like we're the best we're the best people to gamble, right? Like we should our significant other should be listening to this pod where they're like, if they ever really started getting into gambling, it'd be fine. Like we're like the Jerry Seinfeld of against the spread where we're gonna be all right. We're gonna come out around 50%. It's gonna be all right.
I'm glad you say that, sir, because Tori actually told me that this year she was not listening to our pick'em shows religiously like she has the last 3 years, and this is the worst year she's had in the pick'em. She wasn't getting that knowledge from me and you. So, that's all the people need to know. But yeah, I went to the casino 1 week this year. It was that Georgia Kentucky game, and it was I'm just not a huge gambler, but it's like, yeah, I'll go here and there. And it was a solid weekend. I thought, I'm watching enough of this stuff. I should be putting some of this information to use and make a little money off of it. But, we're soul skaters here. We just do it for the love of the game.
Absolutely.
Had to get a Brink reference in there for the Chase Thomas podcast.
Hey, man, I'm here for the Team Pub and Suds Team X-Blades war here. I'll always, anyone who's ready to talk about some Brink content, I'm ready for it. Did Val cheat when he pushed Andy Brinker down when he's rounding the corner? What? I don't know. Who won? It was a neck and neck finish. Did Andy break through over Val? Who knows?
Also, last thing, this has gone off already on the rails, but why was it so bad that Brink just make a little money while skating as like a 16-year-old? Is that maybe this is before the NIL? I don't know. Maybe I've just been trained, one way, but I feel like his friends overreacted. His dad, what his dad lost his job? Is that a work because of a work injury, right? Like he's just trying to help the family. You got to understand that, friends.
Oh, 100%. I thought the friends went way too hard at Andy for doing this. He shouldn't have had to hide going to Team X-Blades. Also, Team X-Blades is a cool thing. If I was in high school, and I was a good rollerblader in LA, you know what I'm going to go do? I'm going to join Team X-Blades. It's pretty fun. It looks pretty cool. Like, it wasn't also, like they're out here doing anything bad. They're just getting paid to skate. Who cares?
Yeah, is there no room? Can Team X-Blades not have a black team and a yellow team? Get fully recruit the whole team Pup and Suds on your squad, X-Blades. What are you doing?
That's true. Like the portal's always open in high school recruiting in the late 90s for rollerblading.
You got to.
Yeah,
just buy out your competition.
It's also like he's not going to be there all the time. He can still skate with y'all. Y'all don't have to. It's not like the guy's like leaving you and he's only hanging out with him from here on out. But it's I don't know. What are we doing? What are we doing? I tend to agree there. There was a lot of an overreaction, but I also think Team Pup and Suds is an awesome mascot. If I would, that's a good branding. Great T-shirt, over there. So it worked out for him in the end, which is kind of funny anyway. After all that, he gets branding anyway, and they do go in the NIL front.
That's true. They still had to get their own. They were just mad that they were getting more money. But yeah, as someone who played a fantasy football league for no money for like the first probably like 10 years that we did it, like I understand the soul skaters. Just some do it for the love of the game.
But you could do both. Like he could still hang out. Like people do it all the time. People I don't know. You can do both. You can hang out with your friends and rollerblade, and also go make money and do it a little bit on the side to help out the fam. Bad luck for the pup insides.
There you go.
Matt Green, always a pleasure, and I'll talk to you in a couple days.
Yes, sir.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.